Hey y'all. So just the other morning, I was crying out to the Lord over something that has bothered me for a while. And I really was crying out like, Lord, I need to stop trying to just fix this. Lord, I really want to give this to you. And later in the day, the Lord actually gave me a resource, and so something that's going to help me with this particular matter. And I just really sat in awe over what He had done and how He had so quickly given me resource to make this thing turn a different direction, to where I could feel differently and know differently about this thing. So, interestingly enough, over the course of the next couple of days, He led me through cross-reference. As I was looking up something else, I came upon something and was reminded of some great wisdom that came from a dear friend of mine. So I want to add a quick point there. Follow your cross-reference in your scripture. It will define what you are looking for. It is the greatest commentary you could possibly have on any other scripture. It will open up the whole Bible to you and really change your mind. But my friend, she was talking about Psalm 107. And in Psalm 107, there are 4 different categories of people that show barriers between them and God. First, there's the barrier of ignorance, just not knowing. Then there's the barrier of rebellion. And then there's the barrier of sin, the choice of sin. And then there's the barrier of self-sufficiency. And so all of these, I feel like all 4 of these categories mattered to me in this particular situation that I'm thinking about. Anyways, so I want to show you the pattern that God lays out here. First, you have the barrier of, first, let's say the introduction to Psalm 107 is thanksgiving for God's deliverance. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His faithful love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord proclaim that He has redeemed him from the power of the foe. So then you have the barrier of ignorance. It says in verse 4 and 5, some wandered in the desolate wilderness, finding no way in the city where they could live. They were hungry, thirsty, their spirits failed within them. So then I'm going to skip over to the barrier of rebellion. It says, others sat in darkness and gloom, prisoners in cruel chains because they rebelled against God's command and despised the counsel of the Most High. Then I'm going to skip over to the barrier of sin. Fools suffered affliction because of their rebellious ways and their iniquities. They loathed all food and came near the gates of death. Then I'm going to skip over to the barrier of self-sufficiencies. Others went to sea in ships, conducting trade on the vast water. They saw the Lord's works, His wondrous works in the deep. He spoke and raised a stormy wind that stirred up the waves of the sea, rising up the sky, sinking down in the depths. Their courage melting away in anguish. They reeled and staggered like a drunkard, and all their skill was useless. So you see all of these 4 groupings of people where they're falling apart, they're struggling, they can't find their way. But then in verse 6, verse 13, verse 19, and verse 28, this is the transition point for every single grouping. It says, they cried out to the Lord in their trouble. He rescued them from their distress. All of these verses, they say the same thing. Just one cry there in between. And then it goes on, and in the barrier of ignorance, He led them by the right path to go to a city where they could live. Let them give thanks. Then it says to the barrier of rebellion, He brought them out of the darkness and gloom and broke their chains apart. Let them give thanks. Then for the barrier of sin, He sent His word and healed them. He rescued them from the pit. Let them give thanks. Then for the barrier of self-sufficiency, He stilled the storm to a whisper, and the waves of the sea were hushed. They rejoiced when the waves grew quiet. Then He guided them to the harbor they longed for. Let them give thanks. It goes on in verse 33 to say, He turns rivers into desert, springs into thirsty ground. and fruitful land into salty wasteland because of the wickedness of its inhabitants. I want us to recognize something, that there are these consistent barriers that block us from our relationship with a strong walk with God. And it can come down to our physical body struggling, the gaining of weight. There's a million things that can come out of a separation from God. But the most important thing for you to do is not to figure out how to get the weight off. Is to take a deep breath and to recognize where the barrier is as you cry unto the Lord for his help. And then you watch in every single scenario, he brings himself there as an answer for your need, to your need. And in the end, in the very last verse, verse 43, it says, let whoever is wise pay attention to these things and consider the Lord's acts of faithful love. You recognize something, that in your life there is separation, but the one thing that will always remain is the faithful love of Jesus Christ. You do have resource. You do have the greatest resource. Step into the throne of grace. Call upon the name of the Lord, and he'll give you resource to bring you up out. And a lot of the times, it's not necessarily a physical resource. It's him. The scripture also says in Matthew, it says, all who are weary and heavy laden, come to me, and I will give you rest. And sometimes the rest in him is all that it's going to take to move you to the next step. I'm praying for you as you recognize that barrier and you surrender it to God. Bye.